Today, we're going to be reading the WhoHQ book called Where's the Great Wall of China? Where is the Great Wall? More than 2,000 years ago, the Emperor of China had workers start building a wall. It was a wall like no other on Earth. Then or now, it has earned its name, the Great Wall. It is the largest structure that humans have ever made. Because the Great Wall wasn't built at one time, it's impossible to give its exact length. That's because the Great Wall wasn't built at one time. It's a series of walls constructed over 2,000 years. It's a series of walls constructed over 2,000 years starting in ancient times. Emperors built new walls and linked them to old ones. Some walls decayed and fell apart. But the last Great Wall, built from 1400 to 1600, still stands. It stretches in an unbroken line 4,000 miles across China's northern border. If placed in North America, the main wall would reach from the tip of Florida to the North Pole. There are also side walls that reach down into China to protect and enclose important places altogether. Estimates of the Great Wall's length range from about 6,000 miles to over 10,000 miles. By any measure, it's huge. Many compared the Great Wall to a dragon, a symbol of power and strength in China. The head of the wall starts about 66 feet offshore in the Pacific Ocean on China's east coast. Then it twists and turns through the land, skirting rivers, crossing grasslands and plains, climbing steep mountains and plunging down cliffs. Finally, it ends in the harsh, dry desert on China's western end. This amazing feat of engineering was handmade. There was no machines or power tools to help builders, or no forklifts, tractors, drills, or cement mixers. There were just human hands using tools made of stone, iron, and wood. The wall ended up taking a terrible human toll. It is believed that 1 million Chinese died while building it. Today, the Great Wall awes visitors from all over the world. The story of China itself is told in its bricks, dirt, and stone. Chapter 1. A Reason for Walls. It's been said that China is a land of walls, within walls, within walls. The ancient Chinese wanted something big and solid to keep out their enemies, so they built walls around their cities, houses, temples, and cities. Wall building is as ancient as China itself, almost. Long before the first walls were built, China was a land of nomads. The earliest people roamed from place to place hunting game. Then, about 6,000 years ago, the Chinese began to farm. They built homes, tamed animals, and planted crops. Their land was perfect for agriculture. Rich soil filled its plains. Plenty of rain fell, and 3 giant rivers, the Wei, Yangtze, and WhoHQ, drained the land. Farming led to a settled way of life. Fathers worked the same plots of land all their lives, then passed the land down to their sons. Set routines were followed year after year. Farmers planted in the spring and tilled in the summer. In the fall, they stored large amounts of grain to last them through cold winters. With plenty to eat and safe shelter, the Chinese thrived. Their culture became highly advanced, way ahead of other countries. A written language was developed in China as early as 2200 BC. Learned men started to write China's history on bamboo scrolls and stone. Meanwhile, other lands still relied on oral storytelling. China's famous inventions. The entire world has benefited from discoveries made by the Chinese. Here are some of the things China was the first to invent. Silk. The Chinese found a way to make this soft, fine cloth by harvesting the thread of silkworms. China's oldest silks date back 4,000 years. Porcelain. By 1500 BC, Chinese were making early kinds of porcelain, a special kind of pottery made by heating clay at very high temperatures. Jars, plates, and cups made of porcelain became a form of artwork in China. In time, the name Fine China was given to porcelain in honor of the country that first made it. Blast furnace. Metal workers in China developed a way to melt iron around 500 BC. Their furnaces reached temperatures close to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Europe did not know how to use high heating methods like this until the Middle Ages. Paper. The first paper was made in China in about AD 105 from worn-out fishnet, bamboo bark, and rags. Printing press. Around AD 600, the Chinese were able to print books by using engraved wood blocks. About AD 800, they invented a movable type press. This was hundreds of years before Gutenberg invented the printing press in Europe in 1453. Gunpowder and fireworks. Chinese chemists invented gunpowder in AD 800. Before long, they used it to make bombs, rockets, and fireworks. Artists created beautiful paintings. Craftsmen made statues and containers out of polished bronze. Wise men such as Confucius set down their teachings, and women wove soft silk cloth in time. Chinese skills would be prized around the world. Life flowed smoothly in ancient China, except for enemy attacks from the north. Tribes on horseback roamed the vast grassland north of China called the steppe. They were fearsome warriors. The people of China called the tribes by just one name, barbarians. Though the barbarians were neighbors with the Chinese, they couldn't have been more different. They lived in round tents called yurts. In place of silks, they wore animal skins. The nomads who couldn't read or write drank horse milk and ate cheese, things the Chinese looked down on. Land on the steppe was much too dry for farming, so the nomads hunted the wild animals that grazed on the grass. They also raised large herds of goats and sheep. When grass grew thin in one place, they packed up their few belongings and moved to the next. The key to the nomad's way of life was the horse. Indeed, they were the first people in the world to tame horses. Steppe children rode horseback almost as soon as they could walk. The steppe. A steppe is any dry, grassy plain. The steppe that stretches across Europe and Asia from Hungary to China is so famous that it is often referred to as the steppe with a capital S. The steppe is the biggest grassland in the world. It reaches nearly 1/5 of the way around the world. In ancient China, the steppe was mostly north of China. Since the 1400s, it extends into China itself. The nomads looked with envy at their wealthy neighbors to the south. China had plenty of grain and metal, things that didn't exist on the steppe. The Chinese refused to trade with barbarians, so the nomads stole what they needed instead. In the fall, when the harvest was at its peak, warriors armed with bows and arrows swept down into China. Sometimes small bands of armies raided, other times it was just a few hungry horsemen. Their power lay in surprise attacks, hit and run. Horsemen stormed into farms and villages, shooting with deadly aim while galloping at full speed. They took whatever they could get. Then, in a flash, they disappeared back to the steppe. They left behind ruined villages and many dead. How could the Chinese protect themselves? Conquering the nomads was impossible. There were too many small tribes. They were scattered all over the steppe and always on the move. The Chinese fell upon a single answer. They would build walls. Chapter 2. Walls grow bigger. Bum, bum, bum. The first ancient walls in China were built around 4000 BC. Families built them around their farms and barns. Walls also protected their temples in time. Chinese cities grew large and put up walls too. In fact, the Chinese word for city means wall. City walls enclosed an entire village in a huge square. The tops were wide enough for soldiers to stand guard. Heavy wooden gates were built into opposite sides of the wall. Soldiers guarded them during the day, letting townspeople pass in and out. At night, the gates were closed and locked. The Chinese made their walls out of dirt, huge piles of dirt. How could earthen walls stand strong against rain and wind? The secret lay in packing the dirt in thin layers. Each layer was pounded hard, rock hard, before the next layer was added. The Chinese pounded with their feet or simple stone tools. Ramming the earth this way removed all air pockets and kept the wall from sinking later. This method worked so well that the Chinese used it for the next 6,000 years. During the 400s BC, Chinese cities began joining together to form states. Each state was like a small kingdom, covering hundreds of square miles. Ruling over each one was a warlord or king. Every state had different resources. One controlled rich iron mines, another jade. Still, other states had forests of bamboo, fertile farmland, or miles of rice paddies. In time, states began fighting each other for control. Every king wanted to grab others' resources for himself. To protect their borders, kings started to build longer walls than ever. The biggest city walls had reached 20 miles in length, but state walls stretched up to 800 miles long. That's crazy. The Iron Age had arrived in China. So building walls was a bit easier. Iron shovels and sharp axes replaced tools made of wood and stone. However, there was nothing new about what went inside the walls. They were still filled with rammed earth. Fighting peaked between 475 BC and 221 BC. These years became so violent they are now known as the Warring States period. Periods with tens of thousands of soldiers clashed on battlefields across the land. No longer were barbarians the chief enemy. No, now China fought against itself. Early state battles lasted only a few days, but later on, armies raged against each other for weeks or months at a time. It was all-out war. Wait, I gotta check. No, I didn't skip. Warring states in China. The Qin, Zhao, Wei, Han, Chu, Qi, and Yan. Huge armies numbering hundreds of thousands clashed on battlefields across the land. Battle plans called for attacks on all fronts. Foot soldiers thrust 18-foot pikes and slashed with dagger axes. Warriors on horseback hurled swords and spears. Archers shot from the platforms of charging chariots. Men at mounted crossbows fired arrow after arrow. In 246 BC, a teenage boy named Zhang took the throne of a state called Qin. By that time, 7 states were still standing. Zhang set out to control the other 6. For the next 25 years, it's too long. He waged war. His forces captured 10,000 prisoners in one state, then killed them all. One by one, states fell to Zhang's military might. Finally, in 221 BC, Zhang crushed the last one. This ruthless man was no longer just the king of Qin. He was supreme ruler of all China. Immediately, he renamed himself Qin Shi Huangdi. It means first emperor of China. Another spelling for Qin is Qin. So Qin lives on today in the name of the nation he unified, China. Chapter 3. A ruthless ruler. China's first emperor was a man of two extremes. As a leader, he was a genius. Many of his reforms lasted to stay. As ruler, he was a tyrant, cruel and unforgiving. Qin wanted to sweep away China's past. He ordered state walls to be torn down. Kings and warlords were stripped of their lands and weapons. Now, new roads and canals were built to link distant parts of his empire. For centuries, states had passed different laws, spoken different languages, and paid for goods with different coins. Now, the first emperor commanded that all his subjects do things one way, his way. From then on, there would be just one written language in the land. New coins replaced the old. Traders had to use a single set of weights and measures. The emperor even demanded that carts be made the same width in order to ease road travel. Most important, he set up a new way to govern the vast empire, spreading over nearly 2 million square miles. It was the largest empire in the world by far. How could the first emperor organize all the millions of people living in his land? In a brilliant plan, he created the world's first central government. At the bottom were leaders of villages, then leaders of townships, then counties, and so on. Each rank reported to the one above it. At the very top was the emperor. The emperor's far-reaching government turned a group of warring states into one smoothly running empire. Size of China. The borders of China have shifted through the ages. When the first emperor united the country, China spread out over 1 million square miles, from the Pacific Ocean to the edge of the Gobi Desert. Still, it was only about 1/3 of the size of China now. Today, China has more than 3.5 million square miles, making it the fourth largest country in the world with over 1 billion people. China has the world's largest population. To stay in control, Emperor Qin cut off all free thought. Scholars, the educated class, had always held high places of honor in China. Kings had often sought their advice. Not the first emperor, scholars posed a threat to his power. Qin rounded up 460 leading intellectuals and buried them alive. Next, he ordered soldiers to search out all books in the empire and burn them in public bonfires. Only books on medicine and farming were spared. Scholars tried to save their books by burying them or learning them by heart. If caught, they were killed on the spot. The emperor's iron fist controlled daily life too. Citizens needed passes to go everywhere. No one dared to disobey royal orders. They can risk the loss. They ran the risk of losing a limb, being branded, or worse, beheaded. Fear of the emperor spread like a disease through China. He has all-seeing eyes, the nose of a hornet, the voice of a jackal, and the heart of a wolf, it was reported. Only one thing lay beyond the emperor's control: barbarian attacks. Regularly armed nomads still swept down from the north. They had to be stopped. But how? Emperor Qin settled on an age-old solution. He would put up a wall like none other before. This one would stretch 3,000 miles across the northern border. The first emperor was about to build the first Great Wall of China. Confucius, 551 to 479 BC, was a Chinese teacher who had an enormous influence on his people. For centuries, men seeking government posts were required to pass a test on his teachings. Confucius taught that people were basically good and that leaders should be kind and just. One of his teachings was the first version of the Golden Rule: do not do to others what you do not wish for yourself. Confucius stressed good behavior on both the personal and governmental levels. Family loyalty was highly valued as well. Because of Confucius, every Chinese home kept a shrine to their ancestors. Chapter 4: The First Wall Goes Up. Who was going to build the emperor's enormous wall? Nearly every Chinese man who could walk and dig. The emperor ordered hundreds of thousands of his subjects to work. Peasants were made to leave their farms. Scholars who never lifted more than a scroll were given shovels. Even convicts who were hauled from prisons and marched to the wall with chains around their necks. No one went by choice. No one was paid. All were slaves to the empire. Royal engineers and architects came up with a bold and difficult plan. Beginning at the Yellow Sea in the east, the Great Wall ran 3,000 miles across the northern border, all the way to the Gobi Desert. The word wall hardly captures all that went into it. There were also brick towers and outposts, thousands of them. That's where the building began. Towers had to be made with wooden bricks. To make the bricks, laborers poured mud into wooden molds, then baked them in the sun. The bases of the towers were 40 feet square, but the tops were just 30 feet square. Tower walls were sloped inward to make them more stable. 3 stories high, the towers served an important role for the army. Weapons were stored inside and troops were housed there. The rooftops were lookout stations as well as places to fight. During battle, soldiers shot arrows through slits built into the rampart low walls that lined the roof. Towers were also used to send messages. How is this possible? Through smoke signals. When barbarians were spotted, soldiers raced to build fires in roof pits. Smoke billowing into the sky meant calling all troops. Come immediately. A special code ordered other towers to the size of incoming armies. One column of smoke that 100 enemy troops were on their way. 5 columns meant, watch out, 100,000 enemy soldiers are attacking. When a tower picked up the signal, it too built a fire and passed it along. The Great Wall was one long emergency alarm, and soldiers were running or galloping along the wall to the scene of battle. Towers were also spaced 2 arrow shots apart. That way the enemy was always in firing range from one tower to the next. Outposts were forts built on the enemy's side of the Great Wall. The soldiers who lived there formed the first line of defense. They went forth to meet the enemy before the rest of the Chinese army arrives. When laborers first finished work on the towers and outposts, they started in on the wall itself. First, crews built a frame out of bamboo. It stood as high and wide as the planned wall. Nearby, supply crews dug up tons of soil. They lugged it to the wall and moving baskets swung across their shoulders. After climbing the frame on ladders, they dumped the dirt over the top. From there, frame crews took over, spreading and pounding the soil into thin layers no more than 6 inches thick. Slowly, layer by layer, the Great Wall rose. When the packed earth finally reached the top of the framework, workers pulled the frame away. Then they moved it down the line to the next spot, and the round of labor began all over again. Heaps of rubble formed a strong, solid barrier. When a section of the wall was done, laborers lined the top with stones. The wall was wide enough for 5 horsemen to gallop across side by side. In other words, the top of the Great Wall became a paved road. Chapter 5. Downfall. The workers on the Great Wall were treated as slaves. Was it possible to escape? No. The emperor sent 300,000 soldiers to stand guard over the workers. Their orders: prevent escape, drive the men hard, use force if necessary. Soldiers made sure that crews toiled from sunrise to sunset. During the summer, that meant 16-hour work days in blazing heat. During the winter, the temperature often dropped to freezing, and yet the work never stopped. Workers had almost no protection from the weather. They wore whatever clothes they came in, which soon turned into rags. At night, they slept in crowded tents or outside on the ground. For food, they got bowls of rice and boiled cabbage. The supply lines couldn't get through. Laborers went hungry for days. Sickness, severe weather, and exhaustion took their toll. It's believed that 700,000 men died building the first Great Wall. No time was taken to bury the dead. They lay where they fell. The wall became known as the longest cemetery on earth. The first emperor placed little value on other people's lives, and yet death was the one thing that scared him. For years, he searched for a magic potion that would make him live forever. Of course, he never found it, so he ordered 700,000 workers to build him a grand tomb where his body would be placed in it and could enjoy a happy afterlife. The emperor buried the tomb laborers alive when their work was finished, so they could not disclose the tomb's location. The enormous underground tomb covered at least 3 acres. Standing guard over the emperor's body was a quiet army carefully arranged for battle. 7,000 clay soldiers were armed with real weapons, spears, swords, and crossbows. All stood as big as life. Yet no two looked alike. Chinese artists crafted the soldiers from terracotta, a reddish brown clay. Some knelt at crossbows, some were placed in chariots pulled by life-size horses. Before his tomb could be finished, the first emperor suddenly died at age 49. The year was 210 BC. No one knows for sure if the hated ruler was killed or died of natural causes. Word of his death flew quickly through the empire. Uprisings broke out, joined by thousands of peasants. Just 4 years after his death, after Qin died, his dynasty was overthrown. A dynasty is a family that stays in control of an empire. It had lasted only 15 years, yet the first emperor's achievements lived on. The Chinese people lasted into the 20th century, and Qin's basic wall plan was used by subsequent emperors for 2,000 years. The first emperor's tomb. The secret of the emperor's tomb was kept for more than 2,000 years. Then in 1974, near the city of Xi'an, some peasants were drilling a well. They dig up part of one of the terracotta soldiers. That was how the tomb was discovered. Soon, restoration of the Khoi army began, and it continues today. More than 1 million people were from around the globe visit Xi'an to see the soldiers. Much of the tomb has yet to be unearthed. The Chinese fear that air may destroy the priceless treasures within. Ancient texts disclose that the tomb contains a model of the Chinese Empire. Gems and pearls on the wooden roof shine like the sun, moon, and stars. Models of China's great rivers made of liquid mercury flow through the tiny kingdom. Recent findings suggest that the burial ground is much larger than anyone had thought, maybe 20 square miles. Alright guys, we're going to end right here today, chapter 6, Peace Along the Wall. Alright guys, have a great day. Bye.